Hi, Dallas. I'm Dr. Kelvin Baggett, the City of Dallas COVID-19 Health and Healthcare Access Czar. As the parent of 2 school-aged children, I have to say that one of the most important things to me is that our children are able to return to school and to remain in school safely. As a physician, I know oh too well how COVID-19 has impacted lives, resulting in infection and sickness for some, and resulting in death for others. What I also know is that we've seen the measures that can be taken to reduce the spread of COVID-19. And I implore you to do those things consistently. Get tested, wear a mask, wash your hands, and avoid large crowds. Thank you.
Hey Dallas, I'm Councilmember Casey Thomas, representing District 3. We're in this together to stop COVID-19 because it's the right thing to do. Remember, get tested, wear a mask, wash your hands, avoid crowds. Thank you, and let's stay on guard, Dallas.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to this really exciting lunch breakout session that is titled The Future of Civic Engagement. My name is Christina Da Silva, and I'm the Welcoming Communities and Immigrant Affairs Officer for the City of Dallas, and it is my privilege and honor to be moderating this discussion with our esteemed panelists. As you all know, we're in the middle of an early voting season in Texas for this unprecedented election year. And I don't know about you, but I'm so excited to see the high turnout that we've seen so far with the voting process. And while voting is a key part of civic engagement, we have a group of leaders here on our panel who work every day to promote participation in democratic processes, especially among populations that experience barriers to voting and often get overlooked, particularly our youth and immigrant communities, who we all know are very influential members of our future success as a city. So again, we have a great panel of speakers. I will all invite to introduce themselves individually. We'll start out with Council Member Jaime Reyes.
How you doing, Christina? Thank you so much for having me today. I'm excited about this panel discussion. So my name is Jaime Reyes. I am a city council representative for District 5 in Southeast Dallas. So this topic here is extremely relevant to the work that I do on a daily basis. I mean, I'm a policymaker, so I try to look at things from that lens and try to see if there are any barriers for individuals from participating in our city's government. Thank you.
Excellent. We'll now go with Callie Cohen.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Callie Cohen. I'm the Community Education and Advocacy Director with Human Rights Initiative of North Texas. So HRI is a Dallas-based organization. We were founded actually 20 years ago. It's our 20th anniversary by a lawyer and a social worker to help serve asylum seekers navigate through the legal process and then support them in getting what they felt like they need to get stable here in the United States. And over the past 20 years, we've expanded and we still serve asylum seekers. We also serve unaccompanied kids, most of whom have traveled up through the US southern border. And we also serve folks who are undocumented here in the DFW area that while here have been subject to some sort of crime that qualifies them for legal status, either through what's called a U visa program or under the Violence Against Women Act. So we are primarily a legal services and social services organization providing direct service, but my role with our is a little bit different. I've been working over the past year to help build out our advocacy program in a way that's really centered in the principle that our clients should be the folks who are deciding what we're advocating about in places like this, in spaces like this, and also in the ways that we're seeking to influence policy. And so we're doing that through a variety of programming. Our main program is called HRI Connect, or Conexión HRI, which is a bilingual English-Spanish space. And the mission statement, which I wanted to share with everyone because it's really relevant to our conversation today, was created by the group, and it's that, and I'll speak as we, because it was written by the clients, we are a group of current and former HRIA clients and the people who love them, who are coming together to build a community where everyone feels welcomed and embraced, regardless of who we are, what we look like, or how well we speak English, because we all build this country where we live, no matter where we're born. So I'm really honored to be here on the panel today and share some of the perspectives of the folks that we work with about the ways that they're getting engaged, regardless of ability to vote. Thank you.
So powerful. That mission statement gave me goosebumps. So let's now have Brianna Johnson introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Brianna Johnson. Thank you guys for having me today. I serve on the Youth Commission Board of Dallas, and I represent District 4. So basically what we do is we try to get the youth involved in our community and just try to see what we can do to make, Dallas a safer and more like homey place for our youth members. Currently, I am working on a project called Chalk the Plaza, and it's supposed to support and give out the word for Black Lives Matter, and it's gonna be good. Yeah, so thank you guys for having me today.
Excellent. Thank you. And Brianna Brown.
Hi, my name is Brianna Brown. I'm a fourth generation Texan, raised in a little fifth generation Texan, and I'm the Deputy Director of the Texas Organizing Project. I want to shout out to bigBANG for the invitation for us to present today. We are, like Callie, a membership-based organization with over 270,000 members and supporters across the state, anchored in counties that are home to the densest concentration of Black folks and Latinos. We're in Dallas County, Bexar County, Harris County, and Fort Bend County. At top, we like to say that we punch with two fists, right? We got people power on one fist and political power on the other fist. Our people power supporter base are abuelitas and grandmamas on fixed incomes, formerly incarcerated reverends, aunties raising nieces, dreamers, immigrants who defy respectability politics, and people who have never known healthcare outside of a county system. We exist at our intersections, and our fights meet us there too. We have statewide campaigns that are nuanced around the criminal legal system, immigrant rights, and healthcare justice. We also have county-specific campaigns on education, climate, and housing. With our political power fists, our sister organizations run large-scale get-out-the-vote operations that premise is about expanding the electorate of color with an emphasis on turning out Black and Latino voters who have been who understandably opted out or have been successfully structurally disenfranchised. We move a cities and counties out strategy designed to build to statewide power and hopefully very soon a hashtag Texas for all. We're in year 8 of a 10-year plan combining issue-based organizing with large-scale voter mobilization efforts to transform our cities, our counties, and state politics to look and feel like us. We believe in FUBU, for us and by us. We know we need 1 million more Black folks and Latinos voting and statewide, and 1 million more people in the streets, making sure that our institutions are accountable. Over the course of this last year, we've done census outreach to over 92,000 Texans focused in Black and Latino communities, because we know that the effort at disinformation and restricting participation was geared at communities of color, especially immigrant communities. We've also been working locally in the city of Dallas to disrupt the deportation pipeline in coalition with a great group of organizations. Because we know that if we have robust cite and release policies, that will prevent undocumented folks in particular from getting in the pipeline for stuff like traffic stops, not having a driver's license, having marijuana, and things like that. So that's what we do at top. We punch with two fists, and I'm super excited to be on the panel today.
Excellent. I know each of our panelists had to condense their work in a short snippet. You can learn more about our speakers by referring to the conference agenda on the bigBANG website. So let's jump into questions, starting with Councilmember Jaime Reyes. As you know, part of the Welcoming Dallas strategy, that's a strategic plan that focuses on making Dallas a more welcoming city for immigrants and their families. is focused on removing policy barriers to civic engagement. As an elected leader, what are some of the barriers to civic engagement for your district that you've observed? Can you talk about some of the policy steps that you've taken to change or remove some of those policy barriers that affect non-citizen immigrants to be members of appointed boards, commissions, and authorities?
Sure, thank you for that question. So in terms of certain barriers that exist in the district I represent, so first of all, I just want to make sure people know that I grew up in Southeast Dallas in District 5. My parents are immigrants who benefited from Reagan's amnesty back in the 80s. And so, you know, I grew up observing the way immigrants operate, right? A lot of times immigrants want to remain under the radar. And so I represent a district that is over 70% Hispanic. It's a diverse district, but like I say, over 70% Hispanic, and a large portion of that 70% are immigrants. And so a lot of them speak Spanish predominantly as a first language. So those things there, the language barrier, the fact that a lot of individuals in the district are immigrants and would rather remain under the radar, I think are barriers that exist in District 5. Not only that, the way that District 5 is currently, the boundaries of District 5, the current boundaries, are relatively new. In 2013 is when the current District 5 was created. Previously, District 5 was split into 4 different council districts. So there wasn't cohesive representation for Southeast Dallas prior to 2013. And so that obviously can create issues, civic engagement issues. So what I try to focus on, what I have my staff try to focus on is outreach. That's a big part of it. Everything we publish from my office in emails or on social media is in both English and Spanish. And we insist that all other departments provide Spanish versions of the materials or literature. Most of the departments do, but sometimes we still have to translate and create graphics for those that don't. Additionally, we have Spanish language town halls. We actually had the first all Spanish budget town hall recently, and apparently that had never been done before. And one issue related to that I noticed initially when I got elected was that if we wanted an interpreter at a town hall, we would have to pay out of our district budget for that service. And I immediately thought that that's unjust, it's inequitable. And so I had a discussion with TC Broadnax about that. And fortunately, he agreed, because there are other districts who don't have to deal with or who don't have as many Spanish speakers in their district, maybe. And so they would not have to use the district funds in order to do that. And so another aspect of it is when you first get on the council, there's a lot of various boards and commissions that you need to appoint community members to, so that they can serve the city of Dallas, serve District 5. And I wanted to appoint a particular individual. Come to find out, in order to serve on city boards and commissions, a person needed to be a qualified voter. That was one of the requirements. And so that immediately eliminates a significant portion of our community, because in order to be a qualified voter, you need to be a citizen. And so I didn't like that barrier existed. So I did my research, and I talked to the city attorney about that and why that requirement is even there. I talked to some of my colleagues and other staff members at the city. And fortunately, there was enough support around the horseshoe to remove that requirement. So now in the city of Dallas, non-citizens can serve on city boards and commissions, with the exception of the park board and the city planning commission, which needs to be changed by the city charter. So the voters of the city will have to approve that. But when time comes to review the charter, you best believe I'm going to try to make that change. So I know that was a long response, but I just thought it was important to mention all those things.
Oh, it's great. I appreciate that you shared all this whole process has been learning what are some of the barriers. And I'm sure a lot of that comes from your constituents and also your commitment to equity. Now I want to kind of go to Brianna Brown from the Texas Organizing Project. And, as we mentioned before, voting is one act of civic participation, which is, of course, very important. Every vote counts. Can you talk to us about what are some other examples of civic participation that can be just as impactful and drive policymaking?
Yeah, I'm actually really glad to hear Jaime start with the amendments that can be made to the city charter. I don't know if anyone on the panel or out there who's watching has ever wondered why city council meetings in the city of Dallas are 9 a.m. on Wednesday mornings. I'm a working person. I'm a working person that organizes. And so there are ways that I can adjust my schedule to attend those. But for a lot of our members, in order to participate, they often have to request time off weeks in advance. So moving beyond some ballot box prescriptions to increase civic participation, especially among folks who can't vote. And as this conversation is framed around immigrant communities, which include undocumented folks' experience, I think moving city council meetings to evenings or weekends could dramatically increase participation. And it is something that is a remedy that could be, resolved in an amendment to the city charter that changes the meeting times. Because what happens at city council meetings is that folks like Jaime and other folks around the horseshoe debate decisions around budget, decisions around how the city of Dallas works. And I've been to my fair share of city council meetings, and there's not, unless there is a big mobilization by a grassroots organization, there are not a lot of folks there. It's kind of like the typical set of people. And it is a real barrier that we've experienced time and time again. One of the things that I mentioned in my opening was beyond the ballot box. The most important day for us is the day after the election, when our real work begins, the work of keeping electeds and institutions accountable. So one way to do that is to go to city council meetings, county commissioner meetings. And those meetings need to be accessible to folks who are working, accessible to folks that are restricted from going in the mornings, for instance. So that's one way to participate. I think I'm a big advocate especially in the times that we're living in the uprisings. There are so many formations that are going on, so many organizations. I'm a big advocate of joining organizations, which is to say to join social justice movements. That is where our power is. A frequent thing, whether you're, at TOP or WDP, we talk about our strength being in our numbers, right? It's not about an individual having centralized power. It's our power is in our numbers. So I'm a big advocate of civic participation happening in organizations. So the second way that, when I think about how to get civically engaged is to join an organization, to be part of something larger than what you can do on your own, right? So those are a couple things, right? So I think that going to participating in your council meetings, participating in county commissioner meetings, and then also figuring out a way to throw down with organizations are really important in participation beyond the ballot box.
Excellent. Those are great ideas, great ways that we can be promoting civic participation. And I love your talking point of the most important day in terms of engagement is the day after the election. I think it's very critical. The work doesn't just stop at the voting ballot. Callie, so I want to talk to you about what are some of the myths and misinformation that you've observed around civic engagement and non-voting populations, particularly immigrants and youth, that you have encountered and you think should be dispelled. Instead of these myths and misinformations, what narratives is your organization working to amplify?
Sure. Yeah. Well, so I I shared with the folks in our group that I was participating in this panel and shared the questions with them to see if they had anything that they wanted me to be sharing. And so one of the things that came up was really the myth that we're talking about right now, which one person described this way. She said, being someone who is unable to vote, I sometimes fall into the trap that other non-voters fall into too, which is thinking we're not actually able to make change because we're unable to participate in the voting process. And then she went on to share that by sharing her side of the story, the struggles that she's been in and that she's still facing in her everyday life with other people who don't get to see that part of living in the United States, that's how we make change. And she concluded that making our voice heard, sharing our stories, advocating what we believe in is what makes our current life better and our children's life better. And so I think that really fundamentally is the myth that I think we're really fighting, which is that people, who don't have a vote don't have power. And I'm so glad that Brianna talked about all these other ways that we do have power and that folks do have power, because as Brianna said, voting is a way that we have power, and it's who we elect. It's also a mechanism of keeping folks accountable, but it's not the only way of keeping people accountable, as she talked about. And I think it's also important for us to recognize that it's in power's best interest for people to feel this way. It's part of a long history of making people feel like our own struggles are our own struggles and not shared struggles, because as Brianna said, our power is in our numbers. And so, something that we talk about pretty regularly at our meetings is, let's think of problems like a tree. My leaf, my problem might be different than yours. They may look different, but they're all rooted in the same place. One of the things that we're working on is access to healthcare. And so some of our clients are undocumented and waiting through the process to be able to get status, don't have access to any insurance, and are having really limited options for healthcare. Other folks have waited through that process and now they have some sort of visa, or they may even have their green card, but are sharing that the healthcare they have access to, they're basically no in-network providers, and the deductible is so expensive, their situation isn't much different. And so when we look at those two problems, they may look different, but those are really from the same roots. And there are many roots, one of them being that our healthcare system is designed to profit off of people and not about actually providing people care. And so it's really in understanding the ways in which our problems really are collective and our problems really are shared struggles. That's how we build power. And that's how TOP is building power all across the state. That's how other organizations are working together to really make sure that, and that's what we at HRI are doing, with our folks, is to make sure that we're identifying what are our shared problems, what's our collective vision, and that's a collective vision for all of us, not just some of us.
That's very powerful. Exactly. I think your point about, the idea of feeling isolated and fragmented is definitely something that's a huge barrier, and your work in getting folks organized and mobilizing folks to find shared issues to collaborate on, I think is very powerful. So now I want to talk with Youth Commissioner Brianna Johnson. I want to hear from you. What's your story? How did you learn about the Youth Commission? What motivated you to apply and participate?
So a couple years ago, there was a girl at my school who was a part of the Youth Commission, and she was like passing out flyers, and she was like broadcasting this event that they were having. And at first I didn't think anything of it, but Youth Commission like stuck in my head for whatever reason. And then earlier last year, Councilwoman Carolyn Arnold approached me and asked me if I wanted to be a part of it. And in my head, I was like, yeah, of course. I want to help out the youth, and I'm a people pleaser, so I want to help as much as I can. But like a couple of months prior to that, my parents were involved in 4 Oak Cliff meetings, and I didn't know how, I don't want to say bad, but like how much needed to change. And this was like adults talking. So I was really motivated to figure out, okay, so adults are talking about this issue. well, what about the children? I see like there's kids living with their parents, and the parents are, talking about all these things that are happening, but what's going on in their minds? And so I was like, okay, now I really want to help. Yeah, so that's why I started applying and participating, and it's been a really nice.
Yeah, I want to hear a little bit more about what motivates you to continue participating and going to meetings, because I'm sure it's a huge commitment. You're doing this on your own free time. You're also going to school. There's probably a lot of other activities. I guess I'm curious to hear what motivates you to keep going.
I think it's a little weird. I like the meetings that we have. We get to hear about what all the other commissioners are doing and how they're getting youth involved and how they're planning these extravagant events. And just hearing that, these youth members are making such a huge change that in the outside world, you don't really hear about unless you're going to one of these events. And it's just, for me, it's really empowering, because I want to inspire somebody else to come in and, take my spot after I leave and just continue it on and make Dallas a better place and a more happier and safer place for our youth members. So that's what really motivates me, is just knowing that once I leave and I've left my mark with whatever events I'm planning or whatever we're doing, after I leave and make my mark, then somebody else is going to come back and make their mark, and it's going to continue on until, it's going to continue on.
That's great. I think succession planning is definitely a mark of a true leader. So I'm glad that you're already thinking about, future generations and how you can motivate the next group of young leaders. So let's go back now to Council Member Jaime Reyes, and I want to hear a little bit about, speaking of motivation, what are some of the ways that you've used language and cultural traditions to motivate folks to participate, build more connections with their local government? And I'm curious to hear, what has been the response?
Yeah, so I've already mentioned the translating of materials aspect of it. And I think that that already has been beneficial. There has been an increase in engagement with our office from District 5 residents, including Hispanic immigrant constituents. They're calling in to report crimes and code violations. They're sharing our social media posts about events and opportunities and asking for help with things that aren't even related to city government issues, but that gives us the opportunity to guide them in the right direction. Many of them still want to remain anonymous, but they're certainly beginning to engage a little more. And so there are some people, though, who don't believe that we should provide those the materials in Spanish. They believe that everybody should learn English. I mean, these are the messages and emails that my office receives. And so I just believe that in order for people, for people to be able to have access to the services and programs that the city provides, we have to meet people where they are and provide them the resources that allow them to fully participate as residents of our city and our country. Regardless of what language we speak, we should all be able to weigh in on the things that affect our daily quality of life, things like code violations, crime, and other things. So that's the translating of materials piece. But we've also hosted culturally relevant events. For example, prior to the census, the deadline for the census, we had a Hispanic Heritage Month celebration that focused on voter registration and the census. So we had a good turnout out here in Southeast Dallas. We passed out face masks, reminding people to stay as safe as possible during this pandemic. And we're also having a Dia de los Muertos event that's currently, or an initiative that's currently taking place in District 5. And that's the first of its kind in our district. So those are some of the things that we've been focusing on in order to try to increase the civic engagement in our community.
That's great. It's so exciting to hear how you've been able to creatively come up with new ways to promote civic participation. So Brianna Brown, I want to hear from you. What are some important considerations to promote inclusion and equity when mobilizing such a diverse population of community members? And it sounds like you do a great work in not just focusing on one community, but really bringing folks from different communities together to advocate. And so I want to hear, what are some of those ways that you make sure that there's access and equity in all of that work that you do?
Yeah, well, I want to again shout out Jaime, because in one of his responses he talked about like the structural changes that are happening, right? The structural changes that he is advocating for, and I think that's really important, right? Because it goes beyond just like the surface. It goes beyond kind of like the crumbs. So when I think about this question about like equity and inclusion, it's not just like what could happen cosmetically, but what can change the rules, right? So that more of our folks can participate. So there are a couple things, of course, whenever our as an organization that we do in order to ensure participation. One thing that comes up a lot with our folks is just transportation from one place to the next. We make sure in our budget every year that we got enough money to get our folks where they need to be. So transportation becomes not an obstacle to participation, but just another kind of box that we check to make sure, box that we can like easily check and make sure that people have in order to participate. I think it's, language access is extraordinarily important. Our aspiration as an organization is to be one that lives out a value around language justice. We have, real work to do, but we hire interpreters and get our materials translated as much as we possibly can from English to Spanish, sometimes now from Spanish to English, which is also amazing. I think that that's really important too when it comes to again, kind of structural changes that the city of Dallas can make. It's great that there was one budget hearing that was in Spanish, but there were 26 others that didn't offer. One of the budget hearings that happened just now around, the budget, there was a lot of energy to figure out like how Dallas taxpayers, where their money was going. So Jaime mentioned that there was one that was in Spanish, but 26 others were in English. So it'd be great to think about and to have an imagination where all of them can have can be accessible, to at least Spanish. And I know, the city of Dallas, there are more than just ethnic enclaves that exist anymore where people are speaking other languages too. So it'd be good to have an imagination about really what inclusion looks like when it comes to language access.
I 100% agree with you, Brianna, that we definitely have a lot of work to do, but there's also a lot of opportunity. So I appreciate you bringing up those points. And Callie, I want to hear also from you in terms of your work and you as basically a practitioner of bringing folks together and really finding ways to channel power through these groups. What are some of the ways that you, as a social service provider, as a community organizer, what are some of the ways that you promote inclusion and equity when mobilizing diverse groups?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I definitely want to start off by saying I'm not an organizer. I have learned so much from amazing organizers around me, including organizers at TOP and other folks. But that is a really dedicated craft, and so I am just so appreciative to have learned from so many organizers around me. I think that one thing that I wanted to talk about, in addition to all the things that Brianna raised, which are really important, and all really stem from the idea of you have to know who you're trying to bring into the room. And so I find frequently, particularly in interactions with the city, that although there is a sort of stated desire to bring certain folks into the room, that sometimes the people who are bringing those people in haven't worked with those communities before. And so there are ways in which the programs or the grants or the et cetera, are set up that prevent people from participating. And some of those things are for reasons that Brianna already mentioned, like language access, like transportation access, like the times that meetings are scheduled. Some of that also is sort of changes depending upon what we're talking about. So one example I wanted to bring was when we were creating this programming, we were meeting with people about what barriers, what they wanted to see, what barriers they would face to participate. One of the things that came up pretty frequently in our conversations was the fact that people were coming from places that were really steeped in political repression, and that political participation itself felt really dangerous. One of the folks in our groups, she stated it this way: a lot of new immigrants are afraid to participate in politics and share their opinion about anything related to politics just because of where they grew up or where they're coming from. And we serve asylum seekers, many of whom have fled from their home countries because they were persecuted because of their political participation, because of their participation in protests, because of their leadership in political parties. And so, those folks know a whole lot more about change than I do, and are very familiar with political, the consequences for political speech. But other folks have fled those countries, but not because of political persecution, but for other reasons. But they're coming from places where they know what the consequences are for political participation, and they've seen that around them. And so what we were really encouraged to do was to make sure that as we're building out these spaces, that we're building them out in ways that are accessible and safe for people, and that are also recognizing the ways in which political participation here in the United States may be different, and figure out how to build those spaces effectively. And so that's just like one example of really figuring out who are you trying to bring to the table and what barriers are they experiencing, because all of our communities are experiencing different barriers, and if we're not problem solving around those as we're building, then we've built something that's just not accessible to everyone.
That's definitely important points. So now I want to ask Commissioner Brianna Johnson, from your perspective, now that we're in this unprecedented election during this pandemic and the aftermath of the pandemic, what do you think is important to engage youth in this upcoming election?
I think it's important because like the youth has a lot of influence on like their parents and people in their families. And not only are the youth like supposed to be our future, but if they realize from a young age how much their voice matters and how much it can impact, then when they get older, they can do whatever they want to because they know that their voice matters, and they learn that from a young age, and nobody can tell them different. Like personally, I'm only 17 and I don't have the right to vote, but I can drive and take people to go vote. And it's just, I know people who can, but just don't because they feel like, well, it's only one vote, like it doesn't really matter. But in reality, it does. And even though, you don't have to vote, you can still get your voice out there and just like express how you feel and what you want. And their voices, like your voice matters. And I feel like if they learn that from a young age, they can expand that as they get older, and they can feel like, you know what, it's my voice. I can say what I want.
Definitely agree with you that voting, civic participation is definitely affected by barriers, and also it's a learned behavior. So we have the opportunity to promote that at a very early age. So now that we have a little bit of time, it looks like we have a few minutes. We do have some questions from the public that I would like to be able to answer. It says here, the first question actually is something, as a moderator, normally I wouldn't answer, but I feel as the Welcoming Communities and Immigrant Affairs Officer, the first question was asked, what are some concrete indicators that the Welcoming Dallas project is looking at to assess the progress that's being made or not? Valid question. And I feel like as a moderator, normally I would not answer questions, but I feel that as the lead project manager for the Welcoming Dallas effort, there are two answers to that. One is we have a partnership with the New American Economy, which is a national organization that looks at leading, helping cities lead on improving quality of life indicators for immigrants and folks that want to help their city become a more welcoming city for immigrants. And they actually have a national cities index that looks at all the cities, the top 50 cities in the US, and looks at all these different areas of social livability, policy, economics. We have our score evaluated every year. And this is the second year that we've been evaluated. So that's definitely something that we can share as a link. Another thing that we've done on our own as a city is we partnered with University of Austin LBJ School of Policy and Public Administration to actually conduct a third-party evaluation on our efforts. And so that's definitely something we could definitely, I think we could probably share via links so you can have that information. Now for our panelists, one other question that we have is when translating English to Spanish or even English to any language, I would open that up. How can we ensure ballots are translated correctly? Both Dallas and Collin counties currently have mistranslated ballots. And I think I'll ask Councilor Member Resendiz about this question because obviously you've been doing a lot of work within your office and efforts to ensure translations are done. I guess I want to hear how do you quality control basically is a question for any type of government service. But I think particularly for translation, it's even more important. So if you want to share a little bit about some of the
yeah,
we do. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so my office recently drafted a District 5 newsletter where we covered various topics about the district, streets, bulk trash. I mean, just all kinds of things, bond program projects. And so we also had it translated. And so what I had to do is I sat down myself, and this was a 4 or 5 page newsletter. And I personally went through it just to verify that things were translated correctly. And I did have to make some suggested changes. So obviously, not everyone has the time to sit there and do that, but that is one way to make sure that translations are accurate. But also reach out to the representative or the institution or the organization, whatever the case may be, that is doing the translating to try to verify that it's being done correctly. Because people speak different. The way people speak Spanish is different depending on where you're from. So we need to make sure we take those things into account so that people can understand what is being what the message is.
Definitely. Okay, so we have 3 minutes. I want to do a round robin of a call to action for all of our listeners on what next steps maybe folks from this conference could take to promote civic participation in the future. How about let's start with Youth Commissioner Brianna Johnson.
Okay, so I think, first we need to remember where we came from, right? Because America was like a melting pot for all people coming in from different places. But like mentioned before, meet them where they're at. Like there are many organizations that you can go and, donate things, and they're partnering with nonprofit organizations, and some of them are housing these immigrants, and meet them where they're at, and not, have them say, come over here and, come meet me over here. You have to go to them, so that like a lot of them are scared, and they don't feel like if they were to get their voices out, then they're risking everybody else who's with them. Like some of them may not be, legal or anything like that. Just humanize the relationships that are that you can have with these people.
Callie, you want to share one last call to action?
Sure. So my call to action is is really do an audit of where you're getting your information, because where you're getting information affects how you're taking action. So if you care about immigration, where are you getting your action alerts from? Are you getting your action alerts from Black immigrants? Are you getting your action alerts from LGBTQ people? Are you getting your information from organizers doing work on the ground? Are you doing work? Are you getting information from leaders in the movement? If you don't know where to start, a great thing to do is start with a place you know and look at who they're elevating and who they're following. Here in Dallas, look at TOP, look at Workers Defense Project, look at North Texas Dream Team, ICE out of Tarrant County, United Fort Worth. All of these folks are doing really, really important work and elevating the voices of the folks at the center of the struggle. And I would also say that, when you're doing that, when you're taking the lead from those places, then the actions that you're taking will be reflective of the fact that people do not live single issue lives. And those actions will be reflective of the fact that our immigration system is rooted in white supremacy. They'll be reflective of the fact that our immigration system and our policing system come from the same roots. They'll be reflective of the fact that race and immigration and healthcare are all intertwined. And so it's really important to audit where you're getting your information and make sure that information is really coming from the ground so that you're taking action in the right ways.
We have 1 more minute. So anybody that wants to stay in the chat will still be called back in, but just wanted to give that heads up. Brianna Brown, do you want to share your call to action?
Yeah, thank you. I want to echo a lot of the spirit of what Callie just said. As organizers, our job is to help hold a big vision about what's possible. And again, not just nibble around the corners, around the edges, but really go for like a big structural changes. So there's several cities in the United States that have passed laws that allow non-citizens to vote in local elections. While no states have passed statewide non-citizen voting legislation, jurisdictions in California, Illinois, and Maryland provide some form of non-citizen voting. Chicago and San Francisco allow non-citizen voting in board elections, and even more notably, Maryland has 10 towns that have allowed non-citizens to vote as early as the 1980s. So one thing I think that can, go to the question about increasing civic participation, especially in communities especially in where there are barriers, is to figure out how we're having more people involved in our elections, folks who are closest to the problem, or also closest to the solution. That's another kind of like tagline in organizing. I think the other call of action would really be to look again in our city charter. Our elections, our city council elections are in May when there's historically low voter turnout. There's no reason why they can't be in November. So I'd encourage folks who are watching, if you get down with a very basic idea that our democracy is healthiest when more people are participating, you can email, tweet at, send a smoke signal to city council members like Jaime and others. It only takes 3 of them to get something on the agenda, to really get creative about the structural ways that we can increase participation, civic participation, whether that's voting or or coming to council meetings.
Excellent, thank you. And Councilmember Sendes?
Yeah, thank you so much. So my call to action, I want to kind of think that it's directed at policymakers, but it's applicable for the community in general, organizers, and people who are involved. You hear all the time that, hey, the voters want X. That's not what the voters want. But what I always think about is what's in the best interest of our community as a whole. We have to think about non-voters. We have to think about the young people who are not of age to vote. We have to think about the incarcerated individuals. And we have to think about non-citizens who don't have the ability to vote. So it's the right thing to do. So that's what I think policymakers need to do a better job of. And as community members as a whole, hold your elected officials accountable. Ask them what they're doing to take into account the perspective of non-voters throughout their decision-making process. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you guys all for participating. for all of our listeners, for the folks organizing the Big Bang Summit. I think that this was a great discussion and a great starting point for us all as a community to really be thinking more thoughtfully and as Brianna has mentioned, imagining and dreaming big about how we can really have like a very democratic city that welcomes and promotes participation among our diverse population. So thank you, everyone.